Welcome back to my channel. Today we're actually going to be working on installing my second RUCARBON steering wheel. This steering wheel is for Panzer. The previous video we installed a RUCARBON steering wheel for SCHNEIDER. Now the differences between the two is the shifter display on this steering wheel, and as you can see, there's a little bit more work involved. This may look like a lot, but it's not. I'm going to walk you through the steps of how I install it, and it's pretty simple. It doesn't take that much effort, so instead of hiring someone to do it, this is going to show you how to install it into your W211. I'm going to go over the process, what this RU steering wheel comes with, and the shifter display. This is a newer model. For those that are familiar with my W211, codename Panzer, it has a shifter display, but it has an old generation. This is a newer generation. It comes with a lot more features, a more sleeker design, and a lot more items to install, and a couple of changes. And I'll be going over the differences between the two as well. Now, this steering wheel, I had it designed similar to the previous version that I had, but I asked for three things that are a little different. I wanted a carbon top. I wanted the newer shifter model display, or module, so to speak, and I wanted it a little bit designed differently, obviously a little bit more thicker, from 30 millimeters to 40 millimeters. And just to cut through it, let's go ahead and just show it to you guys. So this is the new shifter display. I'm going to go ahead and take off the film. Now the difference is the sleeker design. The other design had an indentation with the screen, and the screen was slightly smaller. This one's actually a little bit bigger. It's more flushed and uniform, matches the newer models that are out today. And if you notice the buttons, they're a lot more better and easier to press than the previous model. The previous model had a triangular shaped design, and they were very kind of hard to press at some points. This is it's a more economical, more broader, bigger sized button, so you can switch to. And as you can see, the carbon finish all the way across. Let me move this forward. You can see how thick it is. It's pretty thick all the way around. Now, another thing that I've asked for a little bit of improvements as far as the grip on the bottom. As you can see, the bottom itself is way thicker and more wider. There's more carbon to this bottom, and it's more flat faced. The other one was thinner. It had a shorter carbon footprint, like about up to here, and obviously it was thin. Way thinner than this one. Now this wheel design is really beautiful. They followed my specs to a key. Obviously I went with perforated leather. I was going to go Alcantara on some spots, but I like a clean look. Very clean and subtle. And obviously I went with the yellow stitching as well, all the way across. And it's double-edged yellow stitching. The design and layout is relatively beautiful. Let me get some close-up shots real quick. Now you can see that it matches the same design and folds as my SLK55's wheel, or SCHNEIDER. And I keep repeating those names so you guys can get familiar with them, so I don't have to be calling them by their nameplates. The design is beautiful. Very clean finish all the way across. Very good leather, and the fold is over, and they don't just stop it here. They fold it and lap it all the way across, all the way to the end. Even though the airbag itself covers all of this, the fold and the seal is all the way to the end, which is pretty good. They did the same up top. It overlaps all the way through. Very clean black perforated leather. It's the same leather that's used on the Mercedes. Very good quality. The smell is amazing, and we all know how that brand new leather smell is amazing. I love the smell. Just like brand new tires, it's welcoming. Now, for this steering wheel module, there's a little bit more that goes into play. Now, this is the harness for the module itself. Now, this module is wireless. It links up to your OBD port. They've actually loomed it with heat shrink all the way across, which is great. Labeled the wiring. As you can see, there is ground right there in the center on these white heat shrink ports or slips. And then you got your 12 volt or horn to cable. And this is another one, the blue one, is also horn to airbag. Now, this is going to be different from the instructions that they gave us. It comes with instructions, but none of this is related to our install for our Mercedes. This is pretty much everything else for other vehicles. There are some basic instructions as far as some Japanese domestic vehicles. There's Japanese, Korean domestic car cables for the clock spring, and obviously your domestic car diagram for different models and makes. Now, this is going to be a relatively simple install for the E55. Now, we all know, well, at least our MB users or owners, we all know that behind the steering wheel there's a clock spring and it's sealed port. There's nothing that can go through it. There is a harness that's connected, but behind that there's a bunch of ribbon cables and other items in there that allow it to turn the wheel without binding or paneling. So we can't run any power or ground. Luckily, just like in my previous video, there is a cable harness that comes out that connects to the actual airbag assembly. Now, there is a 3-pin connector that has your power, constant power, it has your ground, and it has another voltage for another item. Now, the way how I'm going to set it up, I'm going to do this a little differently. There's different ways you can wire it up, but my sequence is going to be based off of a toggle switch. Yes, I know, it's something that you probably would not want, but bear with me. You'll see exactly what I'm going to do with that. And obviously a 5-amp fuse to protect the harness and everything behind it, and vice versa. This actual shifter display module comes with its own LED steering box, smart box. The old model used to just come with a little dongle, which was about this size, the size of this OBD plug. And you would just plug it in and it would just transmit data. While this new shifter display carries more data through, is a lot more quicker in response, and holds a lot more features, so you can actually read more features. And so there's a lot more involved in the install. Now, the benefit to this newer setup that RUCARBON has provided us is it has this special harness. Now, it may look like a jumble of wires and it may look complicated, but it's not. This right here plugs into your factory OBD port. It has already the wires and harness connected with the 5-amp fuse, and this plugs in directly to the actual box, and everything's already coded and wired for you, so it's ready to go. Now, for my setup, it's pretty simple. We're just going to plug this to the OBD port, have this replace the factory OBD port, and it'll just sit into place, and this can be tucked away somewhere where it's accessible, pretty much under the paneling, so to speak, under the steering column. And that's pretty much it. If you notice, we have 3 wires here. With us, the blue wire is unnecessary because we just need our power and ground. Now, for the switch. My old setup, I've had this switch for a reason. Sometimes I don't want the shifter display on when I'm driving, just casually. Nothing. These lights are not really blinding in any way. They're really dim enough so where you can see them in a broad daylight, and very luminous enough to see them at night without them hurting your eyes. Not to mention, this new shifter display, you can adjust the brightness and LED color, which is a plus. But back to what I was saying, the switch itself is to turn on and off the LED display module. Now, I did that for a couple of reasons. You can easily turn it on and off by pressing these and holding these buttons, but knowing me, I like to take care of what I have here. So in order to not touch this display as much as possible, like minimally, pretty much not to touch the display as much as possible, I'd rather have it on and off through the switch itself. I'm really concerned about, you know, turning it on and off through here. You could do that. This switch is optional. You don't really need to, but I rather have a switch than having to press onto this display. I want to keep this as clean and untouched by human hands as possible. That's just how I am. It's up to you guys on this option. Now, where I'm gonna mount it is the gist of it. So right down here below this rubber support here is where I'm gonna dig a hole. Yes, you heard me right. I'm gonna drill into my brand new wheel. Luckily, it's just the bottom. It's in a space where it's not really too visible. It's gonna be right there below the lip, if you can see right down there. You won't see it at all. You'll be able to feel it, but that's where I'm gonna have it, and it's just a switch on and off. Now, the reason why I have that there is because I'm gonna hook this up to the switch, down to here on power. This is gonna go straight to the actual harness that goes onto the clock spring. That's gonna go for power, and then my ground is gonna go directly to the harness on ground. Now, I'll get to the details on that harness that I'm talking about that's on the clock spring. I'll show you which of the 3 cables is your power and ground, and I'll label each port individually, but we'll get to that a little later. But it's just to give you an idea of how I'm going to be doing this. Now, on some of you, one of you guys commented on my previous video on my SLK install wheel from RUCARBON that I should get G paddles. Well, I bought these paddles from RUCARBON as well. These are full carbon. I'm going to be testing them out. For me, I'd like to thank RUCARBON for these. These are dry carbon. They look really, really good. I wanted the dry carbon because I got tired of me leaving my nasty little fingerprints on the gloss one. So I went with dry carbon, so it's not as easily dirtied. These are going to go on to this wheel. Now, I must admit, this is going to be painful for some of you to watch, but this is what I do sometimes. And it's not always pretty, at least not how I make it out to be. So pretty much, I already measured this. You can do this at your own discretion. Here's the crease. Look at the bottom, you're going to see a similar crease here. Where the hole's going to be, it's going to be right above here. Pretty easy, pretty simple. Just going to hold the wheel firmly. It's okay if you cut into that lower support right here, this support right here, that's fine. Just got to make a hole a little less of the diameter of the actual, what do you call it? Switch. And that's pretty much it. This doesn't harm or ruin the integrity of your wheel. It'll just create a hole. The main metal supports are here. There's a metal skeleton right here. Everything else around it is just soft foam cushion. And basically what I'm doing is, I'm not going in, I'm just pulling the drill to the right and left and up just to widen the diameter just a little bit more. Now I could get the correct diameter drill bit, but this is the biggest I have, so I have to make do with what I got. Because I know some of you are asking me, why doesn't he just match up the diameter? Well, the diameter is going to be a little bit more bigger than what this one is. So, little by little is how I'm going to do it. So we need a little bit more. You don't want to make it exact because you want it to be tight enough where it hugs this switch. And let's see if she goes in with force. Very tight, but we'll make some adjustments. Down here, and you're just going to massage it in. And just like that. Remember, you don't have to make it, let's straighten this out a little bit. You don't have to make it the same diameter of the inner housing of this switch. You want it just a little bit more snug because remember, this material flexes. And you don't want it too, you don't want to match that out. You want to make it just so you can force it in and it will hold. And literally nothing's going to take this out unless you push it out, obviously with force from the other side. And that's pretty much what you want. And that's pretty much it. That's the first step. That's the only bad step you have to do. Let me just clear my workspace here. And pretty much, there you go. It is centered, at least to my liking. So when I have it down like that, it's on and off. Again, this is optional. You can just use the module itself, but I'm old school like that, so I'm gonna do this. I just don't want to touch that screen, the shifter display. I want it to be as pristine as possible. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and put this down, and there's our piece. Now we gotta wire everything up together. Now, one thing I can't stress enough is to make sure you always sleeve your wire that you're soldering with heat shrink, the proper gauge too. I don't know how many times I've soldered it and realized I didn't put the heat shrink over. So I had to cut, snip, and redo everything all over again. Now what I'm doing on this is their insulation over this anyway, but I just did it just to keep it in place. And I'm just marking where it's going to be, and then that's pretty much it. Now this portion of the video, this is not going to concern most of you because most of you won't really have this. You'll still have your stock paddles. Or if you got the option with the Jeep paddles where it's those little silver ones, you know, it's already plug and play for you. Now this is going to be a little bit more extensive for me because I have to figure out, now I'm not too familiar with the interface on these paddles with the interface with the E55, but I know one signal, one's ground for one end, and then the other one's the same thing, one signal, one's ground. So I just got to figure out which one's which. Now these obviously don't come with any type of indicator as far as peg numbers on the wire themselves. So I'm gonna have to do a test. Now the way how I had these installed is these are not a direct fit, and I will say this right now, these are not a direct fit for this wheel, and I'll give you a good example. As you see, the opening is rectangular based, just like the button shifters. These are not. These are for like a W205, but I got these for a good price, and I'm going to use them. I will have a mild gap at most on the back end. This is not going to bother me at all. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. And they're smooth as far as the button sequences. So that's the reason why. And they look nice. I like them. But I am not going to be using that section. Now, luckily, they fit in. I'm just going to have a minute gap. I could fill this in with a type of putty and then just color it with a very mild black, just like I did this wheel itself. And, you know, I can be good to go. Or, you know, no one's really going to see this anyway, so it's best you could just leave the gap there. Now, I'm going to be using these and testing these out to see if I can make use for this wheel, but we'll find out. Now, hooking it up is way differently. Mounting, for one being the mounting portion, and to give you a good idea, this is the mounting portion for the stock buttons. And if you notice, they have a small screw. Now the screw is really, really small compared to the new paddle that I'm going to be using. The screw hole is way bigger. Now I found this pretty amusing. I was wondering, I went to a nuts and bolts place trying to figure out the proper bolt size for this. And the length, and pretty much is it going to fit, how long. This right here, if you look closely, I don't know if it looks familiar to some of you, this is the same mounting bolt that goes on to the valve cover on the top breather ports, the ones where you have to make your own seal. That's what this is, which is pretty funny because it fits. For one, it's the appropriate length, appropriate size for the mounting port of this, and it just fits perfectly in here. And let me show you real quick. Matter of fact, let me get the correct Allen for this one, because it is a very tight spot in there. And let's see if I can get it in. And there it is, it's in. Because you don't want to over tighten these. Even though it's carbon, you don't want to damage the board underneath. And there you go. That works. That's going to look pretty good in my opinion. I'm going to like it. Now for everything, how I have everything wired up, this is going to go into the ground into my clock spring harness. I'm just going to tuck the wires away. From here, I'm just going to keep the length of this. I'm not really too worried about it. This one is not that bad. I'm just going to roll it in, put the fuse down here, and obviously hook up into the clock spring. Now, if you're wondering about the wires tangling up in here, because I know some of you are going to have those questions, non-car people, or at least people are not familiar with this, the Mercedes has a clock spring. You'll see it later in the video. And it has a wired harness coming out of it. Now behind that, there's nothing but thin ribboned wires. Allows it to spin freely without binding anywhere. It's like a little, well, a spring. It's like a loaded spring of wire, of thin, like a circuit ribbon. I think that's what we would call it. You could correct me later. But that's pretty much it. So we're just making use of that harness to plug into here. Here's your power, here's your ground. Obviously your power goes in through the fuse, to the switch, and out back to the shifter display. These I'm going to have to hardwire in. Luckily I kept my factory Y harness. I just had to modify it since my previous wheel from a different provider had different hookup points. So now I'm going to have to hardwire them in, and the way this goes into is it sits just like this. And you can see it connects to one paddle, the other one connects to the other, and it uses these little mounting grooves. Now, the very first thing I'm going to want to do is, obviously, I'm going to secure this wheel. I'm not going to torque it down all the way yet, so I can begin connecting all the wires. I always make sure that the socket is seated properly. Yeah, that's good enough for now. At least I know it's not going anywhere yet. I know it looks like a mess, but I'm going to organize all this. Now remember, your paddles, since I'm doing these updated conversion, you don't really have to worry about that. All your only concern is your power and ground in here for the shifter display. And that is pretty simple. This is the harness in question right here. It's attached to the clock spring. Now, your two wires you're not going to see because these are the ones I already tapped in. This is the 3-point harness, the 3-point pin connector that I'm referring to. You see numbers on this pin connector. It's going to be 1, 2, and 3, or have it upside down. You have 1 on the right, 2, and 3. Now, for my 05, for pin connector number 3, which is on the far left over here, it's a white cream color wire. For the ground, it's pin connector number 2, which is in the center, which is a reddish brown wire. And then pin connector number 1 is a black wire. 1 and 3 are power, so you're going to go with 3 as your power and 2 as your ground. And what I did, I removed the pins from here and I linked the pins together with the same wire. And this is with this electrical wire tape here. This is not the black tape, because the black tape, it gets very sticky, and this stuff doesn't get as sticky right here, so that's why I use this one. And it's a very good insulator for these wires. And I put them together, and they're obviously, these are the ones that are coming out from, the red ones coming out from 3 and the black ones coming out from 2. And I just shared the pins, keeping it factory, so I'm not tapping or cutting into any of these wires. You could do that, or you can just tap into place, whatever you're choosing. But yeah, this is your power and ground. So I'm going to link them up together. Once you link up together, you should be good to go. And you can just test it by just turning on the display right up here. And I have a check engine light. I wonder what that is. That's probably the emissions. But back to where I'm doing. And that's pretty much it. You're going to button everything up as you put it. You're going to tuck the wires where they're not coming in contact with anything or getting pinched. Push everything into place. Put the airbag mounting plate on. Mount all 4 screws. Make sure they're adjacent to these, and make sure you have these put in so you can have something to mount your airbag. And then plug everything up and you're good to go. Now pretty much once you get all your wires tucked and secured, I'm going to show you mine. I have my harnesses for my paddles on both sides, everything's secured. Main harness to the steering wheel. This is kind of similar to the SLK. If you watch my other video, it's going to pop up to the right. You can watch that video how to take off the steering wheel cover, or this actual cover itself. And it's similar, just a little bit different. It only the W211 only has one port for your paddle shifters, so that's pretty much linked into one versus it having one on each side like the SLK. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else is secured and all set up. Let's go ahead and plug in some power and do a little test. Plus, now the last step, obviously once you get your wheel, is getting this thing installed. There is the factory one right here. Plug this in to the factory port, OBD port. This is an extra just so you can plug in any other devices you want. So you can have your scanners, and then obviously you just plug in your gray harness here into the box. And then obviously the box is going to be somewhere under here, not visible. This wheel looks amazing. I think it fits that big clunky airbag, and I like this airbag. I like the way it looks. I like the design and everything. It doesn't look bad to me. Matches the exterior of the vehicle. This thicker steering wheel helps it. Kind of shrinks it a little visually. Better quality LEDs too. I noticed that from the first generation, from the older shifter display. These LEDs are way better. Way better in quality. So this is a big plus. Now, and those paddles are good. Got them to work. These paddles are from a W205, and I got them to work on this W211. It's pretty simple. Though there's a little minute gap, as you saw earlier. Very minuscule. Can't really feel it and won't really see it. But yep, this is pretty much it.